lines. You called the escalation between Israel and Iran a propaganda war. We all know what's been going on between Israel and Iran. We've heard President Trump speak about it. You've been on the record calling it a propaganda war. Explain that, Candace.
Well, it was very obvious that this war was going to happen because the American foreign policy is dictated by Israel. And it was problematic that Bibi Netanyahu was increasing his rhetoric against Iran. And this is after they have effectively seized land in Syria. They were cheering what happened in Syria. We knew that it was going to wind up with Christians being mass murdered, which is what's happening right now. And what's happening in the Middle East, for those who aren't clear on this, is Israel is simply is expanding its borders, whether that be by carpet bombing women and children, which we have not had a person with power effectively state that this is morally wrong, of course. And now it seems they also want to annex the West Bank. What's happening in the West Bank, which has nothing to do with Gaza, is the individuals that live there are being traumatized by the IDF. And so, if you're paying attention, it's very clear that they have become increasingly radical and they are effectively, as they always do, using the American military to fulfill their foreign policy interests because they are a small nation. They don't have the bodies to be able to accomplish that. They need the might of the American military to accomplish their foreign Middle Eastern objectives.
Owens exposes the unsettling power dynamic where U.S. policy serves Israel's expansionist goals, not necessarily America's best interests.
And so, yeah, it was very, I am on record saying this for the last 2 years. We're going to war with Iran one way or the other because what Bibi Netanyahu wants is what Bibi Netanyahu gets.
How is that? How is that the case? Because listen, I'm watching the Daily Show the other day, and I'm watching Jon Stewart, who obviously is a supporter. He's Jewish, and he's a supporter of the Jewish community in Israel, of course. But he spoke out about how Netanyahu was saying the same thing recently that he said in 2018, that he said in 2015, that he said in 2011. And what's surprising to me is that there seems to be a community divided within the own Jewish community. You have some people who are about being isolationists, which is something we'll get into later, and don't necessarily support this. And then you got guys like conservative pundit Mark Levin, who I know that you know a thing or two about. You know I know him. I've known him for years. And he is fixated on this. He believes that America should be involved. He believes that Iran is evil and that they need to be wiped off the face of this earth. And that essentially the threats that they've made, not just to Israel, but death to America as well, justifies the kind of things that we have been seeing. Do you have, do you take that into consideration when you're giving your thoughts?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that the public needs to recognize is this intentional conflation, and it's completely wrong, of Israel, the foreign nation, which is being led up by Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, and Jewish people. That would be an absolute nonsense if I sat here and I said, well, whatever happens in Nigeria, it means that if you critique the Nigerian government, that you're somehow against Black people in America. We would all say that's a nonsense. But they have been very successful in this idea that if you critique what is happening in the Middle East and what actions are being led by Bibi Netanyahu's government, radical government, then you're somehow anti-Semitic. So it shouldn't surprise you to see that many Jewish people have taken to the streets. Not only Jewish people, by the way, Israelis, because as we know, even in America, you can be an American and not support what the government is doing. I am not supporting right now the decisions that are being made by the Trump campaign as it pertains to Middle Eastern policy. But they have this agreement. You have Israelis taking to the street, boycotting, protesting Bibi Netanyahu. And similarly, you have Jewish people who recognize that there has been this wrong conflation, as if all Jewish people agree with the nonstop campaign of bombing in the Middle East, which has essentially been in effect since 1948, since the creation of Israel as a nation. And so I'm not conflicted or confused about what's happening. I find it to be as disingenuous as attaching, well, if you critique Black Lives Matter as an organization, this means that you're critiquing all Black people. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that whatsoever. I'm critiquing the Israeli Prime Minister. I am critiquing their actions, really their actions which have began since 1948. The more that I become educated about the topic, it has always been this despicable. It has always been a campaign of carpet bombing and theft, stealing lands. And when people notice what they're doing, they say, well, you can't say that because of anti-Semitism. That's ridiculous, okay? You know how I feel about this, especially as someone who's been called an Uncle Tom and a coon for critiquing things that were happening within the Black community. I am not going to respond to name calling. I'm going to respond to the facts. And the facts are what Bibi Netanyahu is doing in the Middle East is a terrorist campaign.
Mm. I saw a recent episode, I forgot who you were talking to, forgive me for not knowing his name, but you were showing highlights of Dave Portnoy, for Barstool and how he was going at one of the individuals that I think he employs, and he went ballistic because of a joke that was being aimed in his direction or what have you. And I don't remember the joke, so I apologize for that. But you were highlighting his reaction because you were pointing out how he could joke about some things, but if you joke about anything at this particular moment in time, it's going to be labeled anti-Semitic. Is that something that you feel fervently about, that you feel adamant about, in terms of you just can't say anything is such a lopsided thing? Because when I think about the Jewish community, of course, I'm looking at some of the things that are transpiring. I don't like it one bit. In the same breath, I'm thinking about October 7th from a couple of years ago when they were attacked and people were kidnapped, people were killed, et cetera, et cetera. And the retaliation on their part was predictable and in the eyes of a lot of people, understandable. That's where I come from with it. Where are you coming from with it when I use a Portnoy example or others as you allude to anti-Semitism, which is obviously a grave concern for the Jewish community at this particular moment in time?
First and foremost, I can think of nothing more anti-Semitic than 2 years of bombing the Palestinians, who are a Semitic people. That's another thing. They just decided they're the only Semitic people, which is absolutely absurd and it's erroneous. But further to your point, there was this media effort, and we've all seen over the last.
Here, Owens calls out the weaponization of anti-Semitism accusations to silence truth tellers, revealing an ironic and manipulative tactic in modern discourse.
2 years, it's been this increasing slur of anti-Semitism everywhere. Like, people who have been in the public space forever and have never been accused of being anti-Semites are now being accused of being anti-Semites, me being one of them. I worked for 2 Jewish organizations before I was suddenly being accused of being anti-Semitic. So sometimes on its face, you have to ask yourself a question. And again, I will use the example of BLM, where suddenly it seemed like everyone was being accused of racism to the point that it was becoming a parody. Like, someone would braid their hair and they'd be like, cancel this girl because this is appropriation. When you start to see that increase, and what people are actually trying to do is control speech, right? This guy said, I think it's okay if someone jokes at you and calls you Rabbi Dave Portnoy, you should be able to take a joke, right? Welcome to the internet. Everyone's called different things. And he has a meltdown and asks him, Dave Portnoy says, how many Jews have to die before you stop joking? That's an emotional manipulation tactic, okay? Nobody dies from a joke, okay? Nobody dies if somebody tweets at Dave Portnoy, hey, you're Rabbi Dave Portnoy now, as they're critiquing you. And you only do that, you only start to come in on speech and to demand all these rules and these cancellations when you have something to hide, when you are wrong, okay? Because when you're winning on the basis of your ideas, when you're winning on the basis of the argument, you don't ask for more censorship. I want the debate. When I know I'm right about something, I'm not going censor the wrong guy. I'm like, platform the wrong guy, get me across from him so I can embarrass him. So we knew this was coming on the basis of this increase of smearing people as anti-Semites for asking rational questions. And so I'm not surprised that we've arrived at this point.
Well, where I would push back on that, Candace, is that's you. You're highly intellectual, very, very articulate, very researched, exceptional at defending your points, etc. And so that could give you I don't want to say the motivation, but the ability to be calm and collective in articulating a point of view to refute something somebody else is throwing at you. But if you're a Dave Portnoy, just to use this example, and you're a Jewish individual who emphatically believes that there's anti-Semitism raving through this country, if not this world, at this particular moment in time, you can't understand why he would react. And I'm not saying he should have gone as far as he did, but can you understand where he's coming from when he's passionate about it? Because to me, it's coupled with a fear that the Jewish community is feeling at this particular moment in time because of what they're doing, and to use your words, because of the action of their own government in Israel.
I can't understand it, not even 1%, okay? And nothing is more obnoxious than having somebody as successful, a multimillionaire who probably doesn't even touch his own door handles, pretending that he's just so terrified and he can't go outside. That's a nonsense, okay? He is trying to hype up his victimhood because he does not have an argument to make. And that's what people do. They lean into victimhood when they cannot rebut an argument. It would have been very easy for him to calmly explain, this is the reason why this is wrong, and so died because of this joke. Someone fell over and died because someone tweeted Rabbi Dave Portnoy. But that's nonsense. So he went with screaming, and then in this weird slave owner vibe tells him, I own you and I pay you and I own you, which is just, quite frankly, despicable.
Got you. Got you. You know what? I got to keep in mind, Candace, when I'm talking to you, I'm going to make sure I don't raise my voice or anything like that. I mean, you got me wondering if I did the wrong things by raising my voice,
No.
talking sports for crying out loud. Because that's a good. I'm like, let me look at myself. Let me check myself just a little bit more in the future, because Candace is bringing up some very valid points. I got it. Let me move on to Tucker Carlson while I have you here, and I want to get into you a little bit later because I want to talk about some things involving you directly. But right now, I wanted to touch on Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host, got into a fiery exchange on Tuesday, with Senator Ted Cruz over his support for President Trump and his posturing towards Israel. At least that's what Tucker Carlson claims it to be. I want to show you this clip right now with Tucker Carlson getting into it with Ted Cruz. Take a look at this, Candace.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah,
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's,
because,
it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the one who can't figure out if it was a good idea to kill General Soleimani, and you said it was bad.
You don't believe they're trying to murder Trump.
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. And if you really believe that...
We're carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
Well, you're breaking news here, because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity.
No, we're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them.
You just said we were.
We are supporting
Israel.
Israel.
High stakes. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war with Iran right now, people are listening.
Candace, you saw that. What do you make about that face-off right there? Your thoughts?
So first thing I want to say is I greatly respect both of these men. I very much like Ted Cruz as a person. I have had nothing but positive relations with him anytime that I've come across him. But in this clip, it really embodies everything that I think the American people are so frustrated with, right? You have a person who is keen to go to war with Iran, and he is suggesting that it is, I guess, a form of trickery to ask him, what is the population of Iran? If you're going to make a vote that we should go to war with this nation on behalf of Israel, and it is a fact that Ted Cruz accepts a lot of money from AIPAC, so they lobby, and the Israel PAC lobbies. He's one of the senators that takes a lot of money from AIPAC every year. You would imagine that you've made some estimation in your mind that there is a imminent perceivable threat to the American people if you are in fact America first and concerned about Americans, and B, that if we go to war with them, we can win. And so in going through that line of questioning in your head, can we win this? Like, is there a threat to the American people? You, of course, are going to assess the population size. Like, we're a nation of 300 million people. How big is our military? They're a nation of how many people? How big is their military? And he hasn't done that. He's admitting like, hey, I actually don't even know the population size of Iran. I do expect you to know the population size of Iran. That'd be a pretty basic thing if you're going to vote yes to going to war. And the reality is he can't answer that question because, like many people in Congress, left and right, they vote according to how they are lobbied. So if it's Big Pharma, they're voting for everyone to have to take the COVID vaccine because I took X amount of dollars from Big Pharma, right? Or I took X amount of dollars from this pharmaceutical company. If it's big war and you're dealing with the nonstop war, there's always been a threat in the Middle East, right? And we've lost all of those wars, right? The Taliban has our weaponry. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Generation 9/11 has grown up. We are demanding that all of you be able to answer some basic questions and to explain why a threat, which Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence 8 weeks ago, sat down in a congressional hearing and testified that there was no nuclear threat 8 weeks ago. Now, suddenly, 8 weeks later, there is one, right when Israel decides that they want to bomb Iran. It's a nonsense. And I am tired of being gaslit by our politicians to pretend that we don't understand and can't perceive the threats. The threat, actually, frankly, is Israel, because we go to war and it only...
Owens turns the tables, identifying Israel as the real instigator behind endless conflict, challenging the mainstream narrative that paints Iran as the sole villain.
Benefits them.
You know, you sound very, very disgusted. I'm wondering where the word fear comes into play. I believe I've read, or doing my research, I was told that you feel you needed security. Obviously, some of the things that you say are incredibly polarizing, particularly in this day and age right now. Whether it should be or not is for somebody else to conclude. I'm just telling you what they're saying. When you take that into consideration right now, as you look at your life, you just was on maternity leave, you got 4 kids, you're happily married, etc. How comfortable is life for Candace Owens right now, or lack thereof, dare I say?
Well, I want to be honest. I have tremendous fear of God. And that's why you have to tell the truth, right? If you declare Christ's kingship and you truly are a Christian, then your number one fear is of God, because this is not it. We get 80 years in this life, and then we're in the next. And so when you see these people who pretend to be Christians and they look at what Israel is doing, they look at the nonstop campaign of starvation. You can look at the videos of them bombing children, the children crying, shooting children as they try to run for food, and you pretend to declare Christ's kingship, and yet what you're actually fearful of is saying that that's wrong because you don't want to be canceled, because you don't want to lose your job, because you don't want people to call you an anti-Semite. I question your sincerity is what I would say. I don't sit in the seat of judgment, but what I say to people is you are going to one day meet your maker. So you better start doing the right thing, which is to tell the truth unapologetically. And I want, in terms of my family, I want my children to inherit that from me, to be passionate for the truth, which is to be passionate for Christ, right? That is what Christ is. Christ is the truth. You have to follow Christ at all times. And I've made my position very clear on this.
Who are you saying is pretending to be Christian, just for clarification? Because you alluded to people
the
pretending
argument
to be
that has been made by people, and Tucker Carlson just released further parts of this interview with Ted Cruz, and he says, why should we follow Israel? And he says, well, the Bible says that if I, bless Israel, then I will be blessed. That is what Ted Cruz says to Tucker Carlson about why we should be following them into this war. And Tucker Carlson, who's a Christian, pushes back on that. He's like, well, let's get into the theology of this. You think that you are going to be blessed, and I'm filling in the blanks here, but essentially what Ted Cruz is offering is that you will be blessed if you allow this nation, which was created in 1948, that Genesis is referring to, this modern nation of Israel, all right, to bomb, starve, kill, take land whenever they want.
Candace Owens challenges America's unquestioning support for Israel's aggressive policies, revealing a tangled web of political influence, propaganda, and fear. She warns that U.S. involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts is often a front for Israel's interests, escalating tensions dangerously close to war. Her critique goes beyond politics, questioning freedom of speech and challenging euphemisms that mask suffering. This segment demands viewers rethink who really benefits from perpetual war. Drop your take below and join the conversation on this controversial truth.